Hello. Hello.
Hello, David.
It's Eric Fink.
Whatever reason, my cameras decided not to work. So you guys get to look at a big blank screen for me. So I'll just put my name up.
Okay, cool.
I don't know why it's like, who knows? This laptop's been nothing but problems for me, but I can hear everyone.
2-pound hammer will adjust it.
How can you hear everyone if we haven't said anything?
Well, I hear some of you and I hear the ambient noise from those of you that are not on mute.
Ah. I was always accused of having ambient noise in school.
I don't know if I picked that up or not. I was running a small fan.
John is joining. Just let me hear in a minute.
Oh, I see Jonna. Cool.
Paul, I think you have the best looking basement in the place. I must say that.
Thank you.
You're not in
It's
the
my
basement,
basement
Eric.
office.
Your basement office? Ah, nice decor.
Nice decor. Well, I never painted it, but I have some antique stuff up there and everybody loves my Christmas lights.
Some of us take them down every year.
Well, those are over in the other half of the basement. These are my ambient lighting. I turned a lot more light on so you could see me. Normally, I don't keep it as light down here. This was my work at home setup, which never really got used.
I turned 75. I quit working anywhere, so screw them. At home, at work.
Well, I'm 72, but I just started at the Ace Hardware here part-time.
Yeah, that's neat. I think that's great you did that.
It'd be fun. It's kind of cool. I've been there 2 weeks. So come down and spend lots of money on power tools.
Just so you know, we are live on YouTube. So this ancillary
Ready to go?
talk is actually being recorded as well and streamed on YouTube. So
I think we can start.
Oh, we could shift over to YouTube and watch this. Okay.
well, it's 7:01. So yes, you can.
Okay, I am going to call the City of Kent Board of Zoning Appeals Public Hearing and Business Meeting for June 21st, 2021, 7 p.m. to order. Roll call, please.
Dave Mail.
Jonna Burton. Deborah Douglas.
Paul Selman. All right, preamble. Okay, here we go. Variance requests will be considered in the order that they appear on the agenda. Each variance applicant or their representative will first explain the request to the board and will respond to the board questions. The board will then hear statements from persons supporting the variance, followed by statements from those persons opposing the variance. All persons making statements will do so under oath and shall state their name and address for the record. Their testimony shall be directed to the board and not to the audience. If a member of the audience wishes to ask a question of one of the speakers, he or she shall first be recognized by the chair of the board and direct the question to the chair. The chair will then direct the question to the appropriate witness. This will allow the meeting to be conducted in an orderly manner. If written statements have been provided to the board, they will be included in the record of this meeting. At the chair's discretion, they may be read into the record during the meeting. After all testimony has been taken, the board will discuss and review the request. Generally, the Board of Zoning Appeals will decide to approve or deny each requested variance at the meeting that it hears the testimony. Some decisions may be continued for further review.
In every instance where the board grants or recommends a variance, there must be a finding by the Board of Appeals that A, the strict application of the provisions of the zoning ordinance will result in practical difficulties or unnecessary hardship inconsistent with the general purposes and intent of the zoning ordinance. B, that there are exceptional or extraordinary circumstances or conditions applying to the property involved or to the intended use or development of the property that do not apply generally to other properties or uses within the same zoning district. And C, that the granting of such variance will not be of substantial detriment to the public interest or to the adjacent property or district in which the variance is sought and shall not materially impair the purpose of the zoning ordinance.
The Board of Zoning Appeals operates according to provisions of the Kent City Zoning Code, which provides for the establishment of the board. Members of the board, Kent citizens serving without pay, visit sites and hear evidence, both pro and con, at public meetings before carefully and conscientiously rendering a decision. After a decision has been made, the case is closed for the board, as there is no provision in the code for the board to reopen a case. If the petitioner disagrees with the findings of the board, there are only two proper procedures. One is to resubmit a revision of the request that is more compatible with the code, and the second is to institute legal procedures in the common pleas court.
Everyone who's going to be testifying in front of the Board of Zoning Appeals, if you'd please turn on your camera and raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you give before the Board of Zoning Appeals shall be the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God? Please say I do.
I do.
Thank you.
Okay, new business, case BZ 21-011. Now I have a procedural question here. We received an email today via Heather that this petitioner has withdrawn their request. So do we just have somebody make a motion to accept that, or?
Well, if we do, I will make a motion that we accept the withdrawal of BZ 21-011.
Sounds good. Is there a second?
I can second.
Okay. Let's vote, please.
Aye.
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 Aye. Okay, so BZ 21-011 has been canceled. Moving on, case BZ 21-012. Justin and Marina Saunders, 710 Vine Street. They're requesting the following: a 9-foot variance from the 50-foot minimum lot width at the building line to rebuild a dwelling on a 41-foot wide lot. The second variance request is a 9-foot variance from the 50-foot minimum lot frontage to rebuild a dwelling on a lot with 41 feet of frontage. A third request is a 13-foot variance from the 35-foot minimum front yard setback requirement to rebuild a dwelling 22 feet from the front property line. And lastly, a 5-foot variance from the 10-foot minimum side yard setback requirement to build a dwelling 5 feet from the side property line. So who is here to present their request?
That's me. I'm Marina. My husband and I purchased this lot along with 704 Vine last year in February of 2020. There was previously a house here that burned down that the previous owner decided not to rebuild. It looks pretty terrible at the moment. It's just the existing foundation and what's left of like the first floor, basically just the floor beams. We looked into repairing the foundation that exists, and although it's in good shape to look at it from up top, it apparently does not have a footer underneath it. And to put a footer under the existing foundation would just be extraordinarily expensive and basically almost the same price as tearing it all out and putting in a brand new, more structurally sound foundation and footer. So we're just looking for a variance to be able to tear that out and build in the same general site plan as the old house was, just new. Summarize.
Okay. Okay, board members, any questions for Marina?
Marina, all I've read of this, you're going to build the house on exactly the same footprint. I didn't go tape off all of your things because I didn't want to get eaten up by the ticks that are obviously in the yard. But functionally, this is going to occupy the same footprint as the house that burned down, right?
Almost exactly the same. The only thing I asked for extra was was like a front porch that kind of jutted in originally, and then a back section of the house that also kind of jutted in. So on my drawing, I just squared it off so that it's a rectangle. It's not like an uneven shape.
And will that be a 2-story structure?
That would be the idea. Yeah, 2 stories preferably.
Thank you.
Okay, anyone else? Jonna, Debbie? Okay, I have a question. Was that a 2-story house there before? Do we know?
It was.
The 1.5 stories or a full 2-story?
It was a full 2-story, I believe. It was, I'm pretty sure it was the exact same thing as is built next door at 712. I think they were just copies of each other.
Yeah,
Same
that
layout.
makes sense. Yeah, I walked over there today and the garage is existing.
Yes,
It's on the property. Would that remain?
that would remain.
Okay.
Which was painted to match 712. That sort of confused me for a moment.
It is
Same
weird when you
thing. I
first,
thought, whose is this? Okay, any more comments, questions from the board members? Okay, I'm going to open this to public comment. Any comments from the public in favor of the variance?
Well, just to make sure there was a email received by the Community Development Department that Heather forwarded from a Laura, and I'm probably going to pronounce her last name wrong, so I apologize for the record, Scarnecchia. Did all the members of the board receive that? Because if not, I can read it into the record.
Okay, well, I was getting to that as the against comments. Hearing no pro comments, we do have this memo that was put out. Do you want me to read it into the record, Eric or Bridget, or?
That would be helpful.
Okay. Hello, this is from Laura Scarnecchia. And she puts her address as no, she doesn't have her address in there. Yes, she's a resident at 714 Vine Street, which should be two houses up. So she's committing a comment. I am curious as to whether neighbors will know what the purpose of this build is, rental or owner occupied. I am not in favor of building further rental properties, particularly on so small a lot in so dense a residential area. The house fire from the last home there was very disconcerting given its proximity to the other homes on Vine. The idea of having another home so close to my neighbor and thus to me is unsettling. Thank you, Laura Scarnecchia, 714 Vine Street, Kent, Ohio. This was received in the office and Heather did forward it out to at least the board members.
Maria, do you have a comment on that?
Mainly just that the house was existing. The old owner could have rebuilt on it, but chose not to with I'm sure he had an insurance payout from it. I don't plan on renting it. Honestly, I would plan on building and reselling. I'm just making a single family home. That's all the lot is big enough for anyways. And honestly, if it's brand new, I don't see it being of interest to any investors or anyone that would want to rent just because of cost at that point. But I mean, I can't tell you what a buyer would want to do with it. I can't guarantee one way or the other.
I think that's out of our purview for this decision anyhow.
Right.
So, right, hearing no other comments from public, the public comments is closed. So now we're ready for board discussion.
All right, I'll open the board discussion. Inasmuch as the house is going to occupy exactly the same footprint as the house that burned down, and I presume Maria is not going to build an exceptionally flammable structure, I don't see any, I think the zoning is reasonable. I mean, that's where the house is, and that's where the hole in the ground already is. So I don't see a lot of, oh, we can do this. Can you make it narrower or something? I mean, that, for one thing, it's a tiny lot, but very deep. There's not much else you could do with it. And the foundation print already exists. So it was pretty easy to figure out whether I like that or not. And I think the requests she has are reasonable, given that that's where the old house was.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think those are strong comments, Dave. I would also add that's the same pretty much lot size for at least 3 of those consecutive properties right there. And so that was kind of how it was intended upon its original platting and construction. So likewise agree that's what that lot was intended for. It was a single family house. Putting a new one in the same spot as the old makes reasonable sense.
Maria, I just have a quick question. So when your very last variance request for that 5 feet that you had asked, if you do the 5 feet, will you pretty much be right up on the property line
Sorry,
for the side yard?
no, I believe the minimum is 10, so it's 5 feet off the property line.
Which is about how it sits now. I mean, I sort of walked around to the other property and there is a 5-foot gap there.
I don't know if it makes a difference or not. I do own 704, but what property line we're talking about?
Oh, okay. Which actually, I noticed it sits quite a ways off the property line. It
Yeah.
still doesn't mean
That's
somebody
fine.
could stick something in there at some future date. I feel the hardship here is the unusually narrow of the lot, which is a lot of the older city lots were platted that way, and other lots are platted similarly. And the fact that this is actually going to be an absolute replacement of an existing structure that would have still been there had it not been for the fire. So I think these are reasonable, and I think all 4 variances revolve around the fact the lot's very narrow. and to set the house up a little closer, which will line it. Will your house line up with the front of 712? Do you know, Marina? Probably.
Believe it would, yeah, I believe.
Looked like it would when I was
previous
over
one.
there today. Okay, hearing any other comments? Do we have motions?
Oh, all right. In case BZ 21-0112, the applicants Justin and Marina Saunders, owners of the property at 710 Vine Street, are requesting a 9-foot variance from the 50-foot minimum lot width at the building line to rebuild a dwelling on a 41-foot wide lot. Variance needed from section 1133.03 Bravo 1.
Is that a motion to approve?
I move we approve that portion of the petition.
I second.
Okay, let's vote.
Aye.
Yes.
Aye.
Yes. Okay,
All right.
that one passes. Number 2.
Number 2, in case BZ 21-012, the applicants Justin and Maria Saunders, owner of the property at 710 Vine Street, I move that we approve the request for a 9-foot variance from the 50-foot minimum lot frontage to rebuild a dwelling on a lot with 41 feet of frontage, a variance of section 1133.03 subparagraph C.
Second.
Okay, let's vote.
Yes.
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 Yes. Variance passes.
All right. In case BZ 21-012, I move in relation to the property at 710 Vine Street owned by Justin and Maria Saunders. I move that we accept the provision for a 13-foot variance from the 35-foot minimum front yard setback requirement to rebuild a dwelling 22 feet from the front property line, a variance from section 1133.04 alpha.
I'll second.
Okay, let's vote.
Yes.
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 And yes. Okay,
Okay. In case BZ 21-012, I move we accept the petition of Justin and Maria Saunders of 710 Vine Street, Kent, Ohio, for a 5-foot variance from the 10-foot minimum side yard setback required to rebuild a dwelling 5 feet from the side property line. A variance is to section 1133.04 subparagraph Charlie.
I'll second that.
vote.
Yes.
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 And yes, variance passes.
Thank you, Marina.
Thank you, Marina.
Thank you.
You can go ahead and get your permitting and whatnot. You can stay if you want, but you don't have to.
Okay, great. Thank you guys so much.
Take care. Good night. Good evening.
Bye.
Okay. All right. Next case. Case BZ 21-016, the City of Kent, 319 South Water Street, is requesting 5 variances. A 40% variance from the 70% minimum lot frontage to allow a new building to occupy 30% of the frontage along Day Street. A 14% variance from the 70% minimum lot frontage to allow a new building to occupy 56% of the frontage along Haymaker Parkway. a 6-foot variance from the 0 front yard setback requirement to allow a new building to be constructed 6 feet from the front property line, Day Street. A 19-foot variance from the 0 front yard setback requirement to allow a new building to be constructed 19 feet from the front property line, Water Street. A 44 square foot variance from the 50 square foot maximum total area for all signs to allow a total of 94 square feet for building signage. Okay, is there somebody here who would like to present their case?
Good evening. My name is Melanie Baker. I'm the Public Service Director for the City of Kent. My address is 930 Overholt Road, Kent, Ohio 44240. I'd like to take this time to thank the board for hearing our case. I am here before you this evening to request variances for the parcel located at 319 South Water Street. This lot is a unique lot in that it has 3 street frontages: South Water Street, the main street or address street for the lot, Haymaker Parkway, and Day Street. This provides a unique circumstance and a hardship to meet frontage requirements as outlined by the Planning and Zoning Code. The minimum lot frontage can be maintained on South Water Street. However, Haymaker and Day Street sides would be secondary frontage streets and are not able to get the 70% coverage. We are seeking variances for these roads due to the fact that there is a unique circumstance with the 3 roads, the 3 frontages, as well as the topographical changes and elevation changes on the property. The building as designed will touch the property line on Haymaker Parkway with the canopy overhang on the front entrance, but will be off the property line by 1 foot to 25 feet on the corner of the property. As well, the building will be located off of South Water Street by the 19 feet and will also be 6 feet off of the Day Street. Again, 3 lot frontages creates a very unique circumstance for us to be difficult to reach those requirements. We are seeking a variance for each of these infractions from each street due to the practical difficulty of the topography and elevation changes from Haymaker Parkway and South Water Street to the parking lot off of Day Street. The placement of the building is to allow for a gathering space in front of the building and to allow as much land to remain in place so as not to require additional cutting or filling of the property due to the elevation change. There is actually an elevation change of a total of 15 feet, which requires the retaining walls to hold the existing land in place. The intersection itself is unique in that it has 6 lanes of traffic on Day Street and 6 lanes eastbound and 5 lanes westbound on Haymaker with a super elevated intersection, which gives way to a unique wide right-hand turn from Haymaker to South Water and from South Water to Haymaker. These intersection details and with the traffic counts, it was felt that a greater setback for the building should be provided for safe maneuvering of the traffic and to provide safety to the building. As well, the wider bike and hike trail along Haymaker Parkway, which already exists, pushed the finished edge of the building back along Haymaker. So again, due to the wide intersection, the wider bike and hike trail, and the desire to create a safe gathering space and waiting area for pedestrians and bikers to navigate the crossing of South Water Street and Haymaker, the building was forced back, and these were the decisions that were made. There was also a need to match the existing elevations in the rear of the building to continue to provide sufficient parking for the building and the continuity and access for the fire department's rear bay doors. Finally, the no front setback and frontage variances we are requesting are not out of character to surrounding development. The Walgreens directly across the street on South Water, Panini's directly across the street on Haymaker, and the Kent Barbell Club at the corner of the intersection opposite of the site are all set back from the front property lines. As well, the parking lots for the Barbell Club and Walgreens touch their front property lines. The buildings do not meet the 70% building coverage along their frontages as well. Plus, the fire department is also located directly east of the proposed building and does not meet the setback of street frontage coverage either, or that setback. Therefore, we feel that these variances requested for the frontage requirements and setback requirements are met due to the unique circumstances of the 3 frontage lot, the hardship and topographical elevation changes due to the road elevations and the existing parking areas to the rear. We feel that these elevations can be granted and are not out of character or detrimental to the surrounding area. We are also proposing 2 building signs. One sign will be the main sign located on the front of the building facing the intersection of South Water Street and Haymaker. This sign says Kent City Hall and is a total of 80 square feet. As you can see from the elevations provided, we are locating the front sign at the top of the building facing South Water Street. And we felt that the size of the letters is based on its ability to be seen at that elevation and at the speed of the traffic. The front facade of the building is at the height due again to the topographical change in elevation from the streets to the parking in the rear of the building, which must be maintained. We feel the placement of this sign provides clear readable access for both Haymaker as well as South Water. As well, we feel that this sign is similar to the buildings surrounding it. Across the street, there's Davy Tree, Smithers Oasis, and of course the Walgreens already mentioned. We are also proposing a second building sign on the rear of the building off of the parking lot. This also says Kent City Hall and measures 14 square feet. While 116505D1C allows for a second building sign off of the parking lot with a maximum square footage of 32 square feet, we are still over the total signage permitted by code. We feel that this sign is important to the entrance so that there is recognition for the rear of the building across from Day Street. Therefore, we believe the variances requested from the maximum square footage requirements and signage is due to the hardship with the elevation changes, the unique circumstances of the three frontage property, as well as the proposed signage will be similar to the existing character of signs in the area and will not be harmful or detrimental to neighboring properties. We thank you for your consideration of these variances, and I would be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Okay, from the committee, any questions for Ms. Baker?
I'm curious, the first four variances that, as you alluded, really kind of speak to the topography and the three frontages of the building make a lot of sense, especially for a publicly accessible government building kind of right smack dab in the middle of the city. Those seem pretty given. The setbacks make sense to me from a safety perspective for both motorists, pedestrians, and people taking advantage of the space in addition to the bike trail. I guess where I'm a little confused is on the significance in the requested variance for the signage, which is almost double kind of the permitted amount. So I'm curious what other avenues the city might have looked at as far as addressing signage?
Well, we've always had both of those signages, both on the front of the building as to the rear of the building, exactly as you see it here. We did have a ground monument sign, which was more the city's logo. But we did have an opportunity to go before the Architectural Review Board as well and kind of took into consideration some of their concerns with the amount of signage that we had. And therefore we, as you notice in the drawings that you have, do not have that ground monument sign any longer in front of the building. The size of the sign, again, is due because of the elevation on the building. I don't know if I can share my screen, but we do have a long shot that's coming down Haymaker that you can kind of see why the size is needed and how similar it is. So I don't know if I can do that.
Yeah, except my feeling was that you're not a commercial enterprise. I mean, you're the Kent City Hall. People aren't driving down and say, oh, look, there's the City Hall. I think I'll drive in and get a traffic ticket. I do think you need a sign in front saying what it is. And I do think you need a sign in back, especially over whatever entrance door you put in. But I don't know that they need to be, quite as gargantuan as you have.
I think we could take a look at perhaps making the letters smaller. My only concern is that as you're coming up over Haymaker, once it gets a little bit smaller, then it becomes unreadable. It at that point may not be needed. I know it was a real desire to have City Hall at least on the front of the building by administration as well as council, but our architect is also on here, Miss Nancy Nozick, and so we can certainly take a look at those size letters and see if we can drop those down to maybe be a little bit closer. I don't know if I could meet that 50 square foot though, to be perfectly fair.
Sure, I'm just wondering if we can find the Chewy Center there, because it's just a large variance. I also wondered if some of it seems like it's a perspective issue because of the, as you mentioned, kind of the elevation of Haymaker. So I wonder, since that's elevated, if the letters were actually lower, couldn't they in effect be smaller and still have that same level of visibility? Because I was also wondering that they appear to be about 30 feet or more in the air. So they're not for people kind of driving by the building, right? No one
Correct.
driving through that intersection or walking is going to be able to see those. So I just kind of wonder what the rationale was.
I think we were also just trying to mimic the area, quite frankly. Right across the street is Davy Tree, Smithers Oasis. They all have those large signs on the front of their building. And again, I understand those are commercial. Some people may be looking for those and the paninis. I get all that. I think we were just trying to keep in context of the area with the sign and that location. I don't.
My question was going to be, is the font size of the letters the same as, say, Davy Trees or Smithers? Or do they seem bigger, taller?
I haven't had an opportunity to actually measure them, and I didn't ask community development to look at that. Looking at a perspective, they look about the same, but I honestly can't tell you if they are the same or smaller. Davy Tree is definitely wider and thicker.
Yeah.
They were part of a comprehensive sign package that Fairmount presented, so that is why you didn't see any of those commercial buildings. But anecdotally, I do believe they're slightly smaller, but the square footage on those is part of the larger comprehensive sign package plan for the Davy Tree building I'm referring to.
Okay, now I don't have a
Thank you.
copy of the prints open in front of me, but is there a spot lower on the building where the sign could go? I know there's a lot of glass on that corner.
It would be difficult, I feel,
No.
to lower it.
Yeah, because that's all glass, pretty much all
Correct.
the way to the
Right.
top, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, I
Right.
looked at that too, Paul, and there really isn't unless you wanted to get a bunch of black squirrel stickers and put them by it. They left a band at the top to put Kent City Hall, and that's where it goes.
Hi, this is Nancy Nozick. I'm the architect, and I think if we look at reducing the size of those letters even a little bit, it will automatically make them all closer together, therefore reducing the total square footage, because it would be both a little narrower or shorter, and the whole sign would come in and be a little narrower. So we could certainly look at that.
And see, our mission isn't to totally eliminate the variance, but we do try to keep the variance as minimal as possible to achieve the needed outcome. So if we could munch that sign down a little bit and say, get the variance down to maybe 30 square foot variance, we'd be a lot happier with it.
And just to clarify for the record, a decision on this, Nancy, would need to be decided tonight by the BZA, because with the outlying variance, it couldn't go to planning commission. So what the BZA and the administration decides on tonight with regards to that size would be the variance that gets approved. So unfortunately, you're going to maybe have to do a little calcs right now, but
Well, if they say to get the variance down to 30 square feet, that means we need to reduce the overall by 14 square feet. If you give that to us as a directive, we will achieve that.
thank you.
If you want to put that in your motion, we will.
Question for committee, would we be happy with a 30-foot variance?
And just as a reminder for the new members of the board that maybe have not dealt with signs, the square footage does include the space around the letters and not just the letters. So that reduction would apply to the whole sign, as Nancy was indicating, not
Correct.
just the size of the letters.
And the spacing and every, this, am I muted? No.
Correct.
Yeah,
Everything
spacing
within
and
the
everything
boundary.
between, so it's the package of the sign. Okay, any other questions from the board for Ms. Baker?
Well, let's go to the back of the building and talk about Kent City Hall in the rear of the building.
Okay, David?
Which is also quite elevated in the air and quite large, but is only really needed for people who park back there and say, where do I walk in? Which is that door. So it seems to me that's, kind of larger than it needs to be, which contributes to the overall square footage of the signage, which I don't think they really need on the back. I mean, they need signage, obviously, but It doesn't have to be sort of advertising what it is. And there
Sorry,
may
can I
be a
interrupt for a
place over
second?
over the canopy to place that, not quite so high. I mean, it looks good, but the thing is, it really does violate the zoning signage limits by a lot.
Can I interject something? I'm sorry to interrupt.
Sure.
I just pulled the file for the Davy building and looked up the sign right there at the corner, and it's about 40 square feet. I don't know if that helps or not, but it's about 40 square feet on the front there.
I think that provides helpful context.
Yeah, it does. So they're well within the 50-foot limit.
Sure. So to address the question in the back, we could probably again take a look at that and make it smaller. I'm not sure if we could get it to set on the canopy. We would have to take a look at that for redesign. Making it much smaller, again, making it much smaller makes it harder to see. It is a little bit high, but I think we were looking at it in the context of the whole building and the location of the signage there. So it was more of a design element than anything else. Again, if we met the sign square footage on the front, we would meet it for the secondary because you are allowed one off of a parking lot and that maximum square footage is 32 and this is only 14. So.
Okay. Yeah, I was wondering too, could that come off the parapet and be lowered close to the door on the brick? Say to the left of the entrance, and you could make it into 2 rows.
We could certainly look at that. I feel strongly that it's a part of the design element. I'm sorry, I'm looking over here to the right because I have it up on my other screen. So I'm debating as I look at it. You know, could
Okay.
I live with it down on the left-hand side, left of the doors? There might be a little room even above the doors that we could put a smaller sign if it's really too much for the board to consider.
Okay.
Nancy, do you have anything to add to
Yeah.
that as a design element? I know it was important for us to have that back there.
Well, it makes sense in that component because that material of that whole vertical band there is different than the brick on either side. So it makes sense for if we can, to have that sign in that separate element.
It makes
As
sense
opposed to-
aesthetically.
Right.
And I think I'm less concerned about the design elements. I'm not an architect, to be sure. But just again, knowing what Davey was able to communicate in 40 square feet kind of leads to, can we do it in 60?
Well, they only have 5 letters.
That's true.
There you go.
Um,
I was just looking, while we're talking, I've been looking at the main Kent City Hall sign. We have that as the letters are 30 inches tall. If we took those down to 24 inches tall, it would reduce it, take 20% off of that total height, which I would assume would take 20% off of the total square footage of the sign. And I believe that would get us, I'm running my numbers, and if we take the back down a little bit, we had a total of 76 square feet of signage, which would be 26 over for the variance.
I think that's a very reasonable compromise, but it will still achieve the needed. Okay, any other comment from the board members? Questions? Okay, do we have any of the public on here that wishes to speak in favor of the variance? Hearing none, do we have anybody in the public world that wishes to speak against any of these variances? And I'm talking the package of 5. Okay, hearing none, public comment is closed. Let's, as a board, discuss this. Or continue what we already started.
They speak of these saying, okay, they're design elements. Well, somebody designed that, and whoever designed it should have had the code and said, how do I meet these and keep this in line? And because it's a public building on a fairly public corner, I think it makes sense. It's Kent City Hall. Okay, that's a neat thing. The front of the building is going to be a little harder. Yeah, if you take the letters down to 24 inches, I think they'll still be very visible and a good deal. The one in the back then could be concomitantly smaller and reduce the total number. I think we're going to have to grant a variance because other than sticking a black and white metal sign next to the door, you're going to have something up there. It's too bad the architect didn't leave a strip of stone in the middle between the windows where you could have put a smaller Kent City Hall in, but he didn't. By the same token, I don't think we should get too hung up on that. Kent doesn't have a lot of city halls, and you're not going to run into this all over town again. Just in curiosity, what was the sign that was for the police department? I didn't look up to see how big it was, but at one time there must have been a fairly large sign that said Kent PD.
That was part of a comprehensive sign package as well.
Okay. Bridget, would we want to look to a comprehensive sign package for this project?
That was discussed, but they plan to just seek the variance through for the two signs that you're reviewing tonight.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, any other comments from the board members or any motions?
I just tend to agree with Dave that smaller is better where we can.
Yeah, and
This is
the
just-
one in back, you could almost put on a metal plate and stick it by the door. The fire department knows that that's the Kent City Hall, and the only other people are parking back there saying, how do I get in the building? That doesn't have to be some great signage other than saying, enter. But
No, I'm not completely up on the code myself at this point, Bridget, or Heather. Are not directional signs exempt from the 50 square foot limit? Like enter here, park here?
Yeah, this is for the signs as displayed, not for directional signs.
Okay.
So Bridget, I have a quick question for you. If those letters were smaller but had say a glass background that that it was affixed to and then put on the wall, does that still count towards the square footage total?
Yes.
Okay.
It's the entire square framing, whether it's brick, back mounted, whatever it's on a runner that is included in the sign. It's not just the letters themselves. We actually just had the new zoning code approved last week, and you will all be receiving new hard copies. And we spent a great deal of time doing diagrams to display how square footage of a sign is calculated. So it'll help you understand that very clearly, we think now.
Is the 50 foot still in the old code, or are we working off the new code now, Bridget?
The sign square footage per zoning district stayed the same.
Okay. And I tend to support the code because the reason we did it, and a lot of thought has gone into the code, because I was involved with the last rewrite for signage, is to just not let signage get crazed and get out of hand, but to keep so businesses, entities, governments can notify their existence and positioning, but not get so crazed with signs like I have been in some communities where they're really oversigned. So I think a small variance, again, it's up to the board to decide, would be reasonable. And I think we brought up some reasonable compromises this evening.
Well, like you were talking about Davy across the street, the Smithers Oasis sign across the street got to take up quite a bit of real estate. I mean, it's large, it's visible, it's also lower. So it may not be as large, but I don't know that we ever reviewed the signage for those buildings, did we?
They were
Yeah.
part of the comprehensive sign package that Fairmount presented for Building A.
Oh, for the whole building, for all the
Correct.
tenants?
Correct. So every tenant that moves in and out of there, even the corporate tenants, are limited by the comprehensive sign package to the size and standards established by that comprehensive sign package approved by the planning commission at the time it went through that process several years back.
Okay, well, let's do this. Let's consider the variances 1, 2, 3, and 4 and decide, and then we can come back here and discuss signage more. I think we've come up with some thoughts, but let's get the other 4 variances handled, and then we can move on with the signage. So are there any motions, discussions on variances 1, 2, 3, and 4?
No, I think those all make pretty good sense, given it's an odd lot. It's got a ton of topographical changes throughout it. And I think that those will all look pretty good. I don't think anybody will say, my God, why did they do that?
Well, and I've been watching this whole process, even from the early stages that was out. The setback thing was mainly for the stuff downtown, like North Water Street, where we don't want the space between the buildings. We want them at the curb for consistency. And I do remember a variance we issued up there for the yellow house, the historical house.
Mhm.
And we set that back for some reasons, but that was kind of a special circumstance. But generally, buildings downtown, we want them so that the street frontage is consistent. And this building is a standalone building, so really it's not going to be affected by its neighbors. And it sounds as if many of its neighbors are set back a little bit anyhow, such as the 2 drugstores downtown, Panini, some of those areas. So that's my thoughts.
Yeah, 1 through 4, I have really no objections to. When Jonah reads them in, we'll get to vote, but
Well, who'd like to make motions?
go on,
I would
Jonah.
be happy to.
Okay, thank you,
We would be
Jonathan.
happy to listen to you.
In case BZ 21-016, the applicant, the City of Kent, owner of the property located at 319 South Water Street, Kent, Ohio, I move to grant the applicant's request for a 40% variance from the 70% minimum lot frontage to allow a new building to occupy 30% of the frontage along Day Street, a variance to section 1146.03C of the City of Kent zoning code.
I'll second that.
Okay, let's vote.
Yes.
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 Yes. Okay, you're on a roll, Jonna.
In case BZ 21-016, the applicant, the City of Kent, owner of the property at 319 South Water Street, I move to grant the applicant's request for a 14% variance from the 70% minimum lot frontage to allow a new building to occupy 56% of the frontage along Haymaker Parkway, a variance to section 1146.03C of the City of Kent zoning code.
Second.
I'll second.
Dave was first. Let's vote.
Yes.
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 In case BZ 21-016, the applicant, City of Kent, owners of the property at 319 South Water Street, I move to grant the applicant's request for a 6-foot variance from the 0 front yard setback requirement to allow a new building to be constructed 6 feet from the property line of Day Street, a variance to section 1146.04A of the City of Kent zoning code.
I
I'll
second
second.
that.
Debbie's first. Let's vote.
Yes.
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 Okay, one more for now.
In case BZ 21-016, the applicant, City of Kent, owners of the property at 319 South Water Street, I move to grant the applicant's request for a 19-foot variance from the 0 front yard setback requirement to allow a new building to be constructed 19 feet from the front property line of Water Street. This is a variance to section 1146.04A of the City of Kent zoning code.
I'll second.
Okay, Debbie, Deb. All right, let's vote.
Yes.
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 Yes. Okay, now the signage. Any thoughts,
If I can-
motions, et cetera, on regarding the signage?
If I can interject something, sorry. The Smithers Oasis sign appears to be about 68 square feet. in size.
Okay,
Yeah, it looked pretty large.
I wonder what the letter height for theirs is lower sign, I think.
Yes, it's in the middle of the building, not up at the crown. And that does make a difference.
Mhm.
Um,
The letter height, according to this, is 3 feet 7 inches tall.
I guess one of my concerns is we're always sort of worried about precedent in zoning too. Oh, if we grant this, then, we have to remember we granted it. This building is really kind of a standalone, and Kent isn't going to build another city hall, at least not with my tax dollars. So, do we care?
Well, so we don't operate according to precedent because each lot in the city is 100% unique, and so there is no precedent in what we do technically, although the public perception is often counter to that.
Right.
However, I think it's an important discussion just because of the part of town we're talking about, where you've got more street lights and lit up walk wait signs. You've got a monument sign that's not only lit up, it's also animated. You've got Davy, you've got Smithers Oasis, you've got the police department and their psychedelic colors. You've got Walgreens and CVS, right? You've got billboards. You've got all these other signs, all shooting information and light and distraction into that same 85 lane intersection, right? So this is a one-off unique scenario where the decision that we make plays a part in the experience people have going through that intersection, already conducive to epileptic seizures. I think it's an
Especially the
important
video
topic.
sign.
Well, yeah, animated signs bring forth a whole new perspective of signage, and they're getting
But-
more and more common.
Be that as it may, just the amount of light kind of pouring into that intersection and those pedestrians from all now heights, angles, and directions, that's a lot. And if we can get that closer to code, I think it will benefit people's impression of our city as they drive through that intersection. I think it will better represent our town.
Now, procedural question for you, Eric or Bridget. If we were to deny variance number 5, and then the applicant, i.e. the city, could come back with I think that's in the preamble, a application more compatible to the code, then we could reconsider it in a future meeting?
If the options are, if you do not approve the variance and they do not want to conform to the 50 square foot maximum for all signage, they could not take the case to planning commission tomorrow. So they would have to
Oh.
delay the planning commission because variances need to be granted or responded to, I should say, before it can go to planning commission. Or a variance has to be agreed to. So in other words, it has to be brought into compliance to move it forward to planning commission tomorrow, or the variance amount has to be determined today.
Okay,
Unless they want to present the planning commission without any signage.
But if
Sorry,
it's,
could you say that again, Eric?
Eric, can they do that though, when this would be, still be a variance request, not a comprehensive sign package? So I don't think we can do that. The code specifically said all variances have to be approved prior to going to planning commission.
okay.
Well, they would, if they were to go forward to, if this variance gets denied and they were present to this planning commission with no signs, then there's no variance at issue anymore to slow down their project.
But then they come back with a variance request. Isn't that circumventing the intent of the code?
I don't think that we'd let them come back for another variance request at that point in time. But
Okay,
don't allow them to present to planning commission.
so you're saying then they would go back with a comprehensive sign package to planning commission, not come back to the BZA for a variance?
Or come back with a proposal that is under the 50 square feet.
Gotcha.
Okay,
Which, if it was under the 50 square feet, they wouldn't need to come back before the BZA.
Exactly.
Ms. Baker, you have a comment?
I just wanted to make sure we understand. Ms. Nozick has offered to take our letters from 30 to 24, which would take our 80 square feet down to 64 square feet. And we're offering now to go from 14-inch letters to 12-inch letters in the back, which would take us down to 12 square feet. So we'd be down to, I believe, that's 76 square feet. So that's 26 less than what we were asking for before. Is that a compromise that the board would be able to accept, or?
In my opinion, it would be, but I don't know how that affects Jonah's idea of it being a psychological nightmare to walk by in front of the
Well,
building.
I'm tending to feel that that's a reasonable compromise also, but I do respect all the members of the board and their opinions. It is a static sign, so it's not animated, lit, or anything else. So it's going to be lit by ambient street lighting out there. So that minimizes some of the visual activity that we get too much of. And I know that's kind of what we're after with the code, but I do think that's a reasonable compromise. It'll still function well for the overall look of the building and the needs of the
Yes.
community. And it's
I
something
tend
we
to
should be
agree.
proud of as a city. I mean, this is kind of a side comment. This town, he thinks that's a pretty good idea to have a new city hall.
I would be okay with especially the front signage going down to 64 square feet as you suggested.
Okay.
So
Well,
so the variance request is for the maximum total area for all signs. So the request would not be a specified amount per front or per back. That would be determined through their design, but their overall request then would be a reduction of, they would be requesting then a 26 square foot variance.
right.
I could live
To
with
get
that.
them to the 76. I just want to make sure everybody understands the specificity of the reductions is up to the designer as long as the total square footage falls within whatever the BZA approves.
Thank you.
Okay, so we're changing number 5 to a 26 square foot variance from the 50 square foot, which will give them a total of 76 square feet.
Correct.
All right, at this point, is there a motion?
In case BZ 21-016, owner of the property, the city of Kent, at 319, the applicant, city of the Kent, owner of the property at 319 South Water Street, I move to grant the applicant's request for a 26 square foot variance from the 50 square foot maximum total area for all signs to allow a total of 76 square feet for all building signage. This is a variance to section 1165.05 of the City of Kent zoning code.
I will second that.
Dave, second. All right, vote, please.
Yes.
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 Yes. Okay, all variances passed, so I think we're off to a good start.
Thank you very much for your consideration.
You're very welcome. Okay. This is evil. All right, I have to read something before we get into this next these next 3 variances. Okay, here goes. This case, or actually the next 3 cases, number BZ 2113, 14, and 15 are not actually variances. They are requests in an appeal on a city decision. So I'm going to read this off the board here. This case is an appeal of a decision of the zoning inspector denying the applicant's request for a certificate of non-conforming use pursuant to the Kent City Code 1109.09 paragraph A, 1169.111, and 1169.13. Therefore, a legal standard different from the preamble we read at the beginning of the meeting applies here. Members of the Board of Zoning Appeals act as judges in determining whether the zoning inspector's decision should be affirmed or if the decision should be reversed. The decision of the Board of Zoning Appeals shall be based upon the evidence and sworn testimony presented by the city, the applicant, and the public. The Board of Zoning Appeals members may also rely upon their own personal knowledge, experience, and common sense. The burden of proof is on the applicant to prove by a preponderance of the evidence that, one, the pre-existing non-conforming status has been legally in existence prior to the enactment of the city's zoning ordinance on September 22nd, 1971, or any other applicable City of Kent zoning code amendment enacted on a subsequent date. And the non-conforming status has been in continuous use since the non-conforming condition was established up through and including the present day. Continuous use is defined as no interruption of use greater than 2 consecutive years. So let's see what we got here. At the conclusion of the presentation of evidence and after a discussion amongst board members, Board of Zoning Appeals shall entertain motions and take a vote. Any party or individual considering an appeal of the decision of the Board of Zoning Appeals is advised to seek private legal counsel, which they have done. So who is going to speak? And then we want to make sure that everybody is under oath.
That's me, Barbara Griffin.
Okay. Have you been oathed?
I did raise my hand.
Okay, good. All right, so the next is the City of Kent representatives to present to the Board of Appeals the facts and evidence relied upon the zoning inspector in denying the applicant a certificate of non-conforming use. And since these three are basically identical, can we do this one presentation or do we have to do each one separately?
I would prefer to do it all together for all 3 properties.
Okay. Is that legal?
I understand why Ms. Griffin would like to do them all at once, but I think we have to do them separately. And if the results for the first one aren't to Ms. Griffin's liking, she can then decide whether or not she wishes to proceed on the second and third one. She doesn't have to go forward on each one tonight, but they're all scheduled for tonight. But
okay,
I agree it would be economical to do them at once, but I think we have to do them separate.
All right, make sure which one I've got here, 14, 13. All right, well, I will be awaiting the city's presentation and I've got the material here in front. Has everybody else received the materials and all the background information? Who's presenting for the city?
I'll be presenting for the city.
Okay,
Starting with, I believe, make sure I'm on the right number here, 554 South Lincoln Street.
correct.
In this instance, the applicant did provide several forms of evidence that we considered, including notarized affidavit, information from the city file, and various address books showing the persons that have rented the units. We believe that the applicant did show sufficient evidence for use of a duplex, but looking at all this evidence based upon the city's standard of clear and convincing evidence, we found there was insufficient evidence to show that the unit has been used to house more than 2 unrelated individuals consistently since 1983.
Okay. Now I noticed in the material, Eric, that 1983 is when the code we're applying to this.
So to give a bit of history on this, we usually have applicants have to go back to 1971. However, this particular parcel was located in an R5 zoning district that was in existence until 1983. In 1983, the city updated the zoning code, and as part of that update, it eliminated the R5 and R6 zoning districts, which were high and very high density residential districts. So this type of use would have been permitted under the R5 zoning code in 1983 and would have become a non-conforming use if it was in existence in 1983. So that's why that's the key year that we are using for this specific application.
Okay. Thank you. Okay. I just have you as Barb, so I don't have your proper last name.
That's all right. Barbara Griffin. My last name is Griffin.
Okay.
And so I represent 4 Point Residences, which is the legal owner of the property located at 554 South Lincoln Street, whose managing member is David Adams. My client, 4 Point Residences, became the owner of this property in February of 2020. And since the time that that it has owned the property, there have been 3 unrelated people living in the upper unit of each property. And for those that may not know what how the unit is laid out, the bottom unit is Unit A, and the top unit is Unit B. The bottom unit has a 1-bedroom unit with its own entrance and its own kitchen. And then the top unit has 3 bedrooms with its own separate entrance and its own kitchen and bathrooms and all of that. So presumably two separate people. And the zoning inspector did find that the unit is a duplex, so that is no longer an issue. But that's how the property is laid out. So on the top unit, Unit B, there have been 3 people. It's been rented out to 3 unrelated people since February of 2020. There were affidavits provided in the application. There was an affidavit provided by the previous owner, Mr. Jay Wallaga. And Mr. Jay Wallaga, his affidavit dates back 21 years from now, so 21 years ago. And he attests that it's been occupied by 3 unrelated people dating back to at least the year 2000. His brother owned the property before that in the early 70s. And he has since passed away, but Mr. Wallaga attests in his affidavit that his brother also rented that top unit consistently to 3 unrelated people in those 3 bedrooms that are in that unit. The area where the property is located is very close to Kent State University. It is approximately 0.3 miles from the nearest Kent State University campus building. And that area of South Lincoln Street has been historically known to be used for student housing, with several other student housing units and apartment complexes down that road, which I'm sure you're all familiar with. The idea here is that a single family would most likely not rent an apartment where there's another unit, 1-bedroom unit underneath. The idea here is that it would be rented to students, and has consistently, the evidence that was able to be located shows that it has been used as student housing. I believe it's one of the phone records, and I'm sorry, I may confuse some of these units, but I believe the phone records from 1995 show, actually don't even show people listed in the phone book. It just says student housing. So presumably you're renting a 3-bedroom unit to 3 unrelated students and not 3 siblings, for argument's purposes. And the fact that the previous owners, failed to have the wherewithal to save all of their rental records so that we could go back and prove that everyone that rented that unit was unrelated, should not be held against 4 Point Residences. Today, the aforementioned facts, and I believe there was also 3 additional affidavits submitted for public comment, which we can get to, that also solidify the last 20 years, I believe, or at least since 2010. So the last 10 years, that it has consistently been used by the previous owners, and the previous management companies have attested that it's been rented out to 3 unrelated people. So given that evidence, we would ask the board today to approve the request for the certificate of non-conforming use, so that the upper units can be used or rented out to 3 unrelated people, presumably students of Kent State University.
Let's see, hold on, procedure here. Okay, the City of Kent representative, Mr. Fink, are you going to reply to that, rebut it?
The only response I wish to offer at this point in time is that I will concede the landlord's done a fine job of presenting additional evidence for the last few years. However, the applicant's duty is to show that this has been going on since 1983, and the records going back to that time period, for purposes of the city standard, which again is clear and convincing evidence, are we found to be lacking. Part of why our code is designed to allow an applicant to take it to the Board of Zoning Appeals is that the Board of Zoning Appeals is bound by a different legal standard. And so a decision, if the board were to view the evidence differently, it does not mean that the city was wrong in their determination. But certainly for the level of proof that the city needs, I think that the city made the right choice.
Okay, I'm going to open this to public comment. Is there anybody in favor? I guess I don't want to phrase this. I'm going to open the topic to public comments, either pros or cons. I did see the 3 extra affidavits. This one came in today. Let me just write one from Arisen Hughes.
Arison Hughes.
Arison Hughes, 554 South Lincoln, which is the one we're discussing. Correct.
Correct.
And he shows the properties from 2014 to current date. Now their records go back to 2010, and then from that, Moneypenny Realty and Management. But see, that only goes back to 2010. It still doesn't go back all the way to 83.
Well, so
The magic
so
number.
the affidavit submitted by Jay Walliga addresses that issue. Jay Walliga is the brother of George Walliga, and George Walliga has since passed away. He was the owner. He was the one who owned the property during the period of 1983 to 2000, when his brother purchased the properties from George. We can't have George Walliga testify today, so his brother included that in his affidavit.
Is that the one where the affiant is J.A. Walliga?
Yes, J.A. Walliga, also known as John A. Walliga.
Okay, so I'm looking at the correct one. Okay, well, any other comments from the public? At this point, if the board members would like to discuss the case, I'm assuming the documents I'm looking at here, we all have the same ones. I'm looking at the affidavit that was mentioned from Jay Walliga.
Is public comment closed, Paul?
Yes, I'm closing public comment.
I find it a little bit unlikely that a brother would know the detailed inner workings of his brother's rental business to be able to affirm for 17 years, dating back 40 years ago, as to the state of his rentals. That seems unusually specific.
And I'm tending to feel the same way. I've been down this path in another issue, and we found hard evidence proving the situation. But I don't see a preponderance of evidence here that really says that, yes, that's been a three-person rental going back to 1983. We're just going on somebody's word here.
Well, and I also think it's interesting that if these, well, which they obviously are, now rented to 3 unrelated people, that's a violation of the code. Why didn't he, when he first wanted to rent to the three unrelated people, come up? Now, evidently, from what Eric Fink has found out, they are in fact the non-conforming uses of duplex, even though they were built as single-family homes, is adjudicable. That, okay, fine, they are duplexes. But I don't see any real problem in saying, well, you got to follow the code. I mean, you know, downstairs can have X many unrelated people and upstairs can have, yes. Eric,
Eric,
Just to make it clear, when finding that we believe there was sufficient evidence for a duplex, the records that were provided showing that telephone records and looking at addresses were very persuasive to the city of how that's why we found clear and convincing evidence that they were being used as duplexes over that considerable period of time. So that was the hard evidence that we relied upon to make that decision.
right.
now I noticed an interesting tidbit on, I believe, 554. It only has one electric meter. Generally, a duplex will have 2 electric services where each resident, renter, whatever, pays their own electric bill.
I don't know why that is.
Yeah, I just, you know, I really sort of tend toward taking the city's view of this, that I don't see any compelling evidence that these always had, you know, 3 unrelated people in them. They well may have, but I don't see any compelling evidence for that. And our current zoning code says you can only have 2 unrelated people. All right, you know,
I
that's,
agree with the current zoning code.
yeah, I agree with the current zoning code.
No.
And
A procedural question, and this would be an Eric question. If we stick with the non-conforming, in other words, we let the denial of the non-conforming, could they come back and ask for a variance for 3 people as a separate project?
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah, wait, let's say this is now in an R3 district.
No, they could not
So,
be.
yeah,
No.
said a boarding house, a rooming house is not a permitted use, condition permitted use in an R3 zoning district.
okay, so
If
that's,
it's zoned R4, then she could, but this is zoned R3.
okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Heather.
Plus,
So-
isn't it a use variance?
Pardon, Bridget?
Nothing, it's been answered, but I also believe we don't do use variances, right, Eric?
Right, but if this was if it were a conditionally permitted use, they could come back, not as a variance, but they could come back to the planning commission if this is an R4 district.
Okay,
Hypothetically, because it says discussion shall continue until a board member makes a motion granting or denying the applicant's appeal of the zoning inspector's decision. Is that both issues? Right, both the number of unrelateds and the fact that it's a duplex, or are we?
I don't believe that the applicant is appealing the decision of it being a duplex. I think they're in agreement on that. So I think
Okay.
the issue remaining is whether it's the upper unit can be used as a rooming house.
So just scratch the duplexes. We all agree they're duplexes.
Yeah,
Or
the
this one,
duplex-
this one specifically, the only one we're talking about. We agree it's a duplex. The only issue is the number of unrelated people.
and that
And
is
B.
correct. And if we,
And the, you know, the city of Kent has already adjudicated it. The development department, community development department has already said, no, it is, you know, that is not approval. So functionally, one part of the city of Kent has already said, okay, you can't do that. And we're asked to overturn that.
Yeah,
I don't feel comfortable with that, you know.
yeah.
I
I
don't
understand how the
either.
city's metric wasn't met. And I understand that ours is a little bit of a lower bar. But I'm not seeing a preponderance.
Right. So if we were to vote on these, do we need to do all 3 of them, you know, same?
well, we're doing all 3 separately. So this right now would be for
Right.
the 554 property.
Right.
Then the applicant has the decision to table the other two to a future date if they wish. So I would tender a motion at this point.
Yeah. And Eric, would that motion be that we support, let's say we were going to go against what he asked, we support the denial of the,
We grant or deny the applicant's appeal. So I think it is in case BZ 21-013, the applicant, David Adams, owner of the property at 554 South Lincoln Street, I move to deny the applicant's appeal of the zoning inspector's
Okay.
decision.
That
I'll
motion
second that.
affirm the city and reject the appeal, correct?
I will second that.
All right, let's vote.
Yes.
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 Yes. Okay, let's put this.
And
on.
Jonah,
All right.
since you did that so articulately, would you do it again twice more so I can
Well,
remember?
let us hear the evidence and find out how
Okay.
Ms. Griffin wants to proceed.
Okay. All right, case, we'll take the next, case BZ 21-014, David Adams, owner of the property 544, or the representative of the property 544 South Lincoln Street. The applicant is requesting an appeal from the Community Development Department's decision to deny a certificate of non-conforming use to allow up to 3 unrelated residents in one unit of the duplex. So at this point, the city's comments, please.
Well, before we proceed, Ms. Griffin, you want us to proceed at this point in time, or do you want to table this at this time?
Seeing as the evidence is virtually the same for the remaining two matters before the board, I would say, in the interest of everyone's time and my client's time as well, that we table the other two.
And when I say table, I realize I'm using the wrong language that I've criticized others for using. You wish to continue this to a later date to see if, pursue more evidence, to see if there's something else to bring to the BZA's attention. And if there isn't, you'll withdraw the claim.
Correct.
Thank you, Eric. I was going to chime in.
I knew you were going to get me on that. I
Okay,
know.
well, that's good. So you're going to, Miss Barb, you're going to
Yes.
then dig for more evidence and come back?
I'm going to try.
Okay.
At the minimum, I'll speak to my client.
That's fair. Well, then that point, is there anything we should say on these two? Is that should we vote that the applicant has just let them sit?
There is no need to do a motion, as we have stated repeatedly in the past, that an applicant is always entitled to continue their matter at one time, and to do anything other than that, I think, would be arbitrary and capricious. So no
Okay.
vote or motion is necessary based upon the applicant's request.
Well, in that case, then the next item on our agenda is the May 17th meeting minutes. Any
I just want to make it
comments?
clear for the record real quick, Ms. Griffin, that's motion you're making in BZ 21-014 and BZ 21-015, correct?
Correct.
Correct. For the
Thank you.
minutes. So she's electing to delay that till next month's meeting.
No,
But our
Correct.
decision on,
Paul, it may not be till next month's meeting.
Okay,
She's continued to the case. There's not a time limit on it until she makes a decision what to do and to withdraw
okay.
or to
then
continue. Yeah,
to a
so we don't put a
future
time
date.
limit on that.
Yeah, change my
But does
comment
that
then to a
then-
future date to be determined.
does that then obviate our decision on BZ013?
No.
Good.
That's done. That's
Thank
done.
you.
All right, minutes. Everybody a chance to look them over. Any comments? Would somebody make a motion to accept them?
I move that we accept the City of Kent Board of Zoning Appeals Public Hearing and Business Meeting Minutes for May 17th, 2021.
Okay, let's
I
vote.
can second.
Okay, second, thank you. All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Motion passes. Do we have any other business this evening, Mr. Fink or Bridget?
Yes, I just wanted you to know that beginning with July, meetings will be in person again
Oh, thank you.
at the fire station, and the public will be in attendance as well. So it'll be the same procedures and protocol as we had before. And they'll be down in the training room. When you receive notification, we'll remind you again that it will be there. So just realize this is our last Zoom meeting. And for those of you that have been here helping us out with this, I appreciate it. But I am glad to see these Zoom meetings go, especially now since I have no camera. My computer apparently doesn't like my camera. So
I've done a lot of Zooming for the last 15 months. I'm glad to see we're opening back up. Good news. Do we have a motion for adjournment or any further comments?
Go ahead, Debbie, make a motion.
Go for it, Debbie.
I guess I make a motion to adjourn our meeting.
Perfect.
I'll second
Who
it.
can second?
Okay. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Officially, meeting is adjourned.
Bridget,
Go ahead.
I just have a quick question for Bridget. Bridget, I had originally told you that I won't be able to make the August meeting. I'm not sure if you have any cases that far out.
that's a question for
I just
Heather.
don't know. Okay, I just didn't know if that would be a problem if only 3 of us were here.
Well, we can have the meeting, but the applicants would be notified that they would have to have a unanimous vote of the board in order to go forward.
Okay. I have a quick question for probably Heather. The materials for BZA 14 and 15, should we keep that or will you be issuing new stuff?
I mean, this is
If you
about a
can keep
tree's
it,
worth
that
of
would be great.
paper.
Pardon, Heather?
If you can keep it, that'd be great, but I will send out new stuff.
Okay, well, I'll keep it. There's a lot of paper there. Ooh.
You know what I
And
realized?
then one last,
Go ahead, Debbie.
sorry, one last question. Are we required to wear masks?
No, if you are vaccinated.
Okay.
If you are not, if
Okay.
you are not vaccinated, then you are required to
Then
wear
no.
a mask. So, and I also want to highlight, I did mention during the meeting when Debbie asked about the calculation of the square footage for a sign, that the new zoning code was adopted last Wednesday by council. We are going through it I mean, the administrative assistant and myself to make final adjustments of some language that was stricken and added per council's discussion. Double check all the hyperlinks. So you will all be getting a printed copy in a binder of the new code, as well as it'll be available online. So I'll be sending you that link. It'll be on a link on the CD department website until it gets uploaded to the actual Kent codified ordinances. So I'm happy to say that the new code is much more user-friendly and it should be easy to use. We're hoping we'll make sure we get you those copies of the hard copies by next month's meeting.
Excellent. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you.
We're glad it's ready too.
Been another great project. So we'll see all of you in person next month.
Oh,
Take
gotta
care.
find a place
Thanks.
to
Bye.
park.
Bye.
Bye.
Think.